Welcome to your Rally Point podcast. Organizations need a reason to exist, and people need a reason to care. But none of it matters if you can't connect the two. This podcast is where nonprofits, advocacy groups, and mission-driven organizations discover their rallying point. It is your go-to resource for mobilizing support, building authentic connections, and driving real results. So grab your coffee, get comfortable, and let's rally together to create the impact you're meant to make. This is your Rally Point podcast, brought to you by rallycorp.com.
Hey there, James with your Rally Point podcast, back with Jack for the next episode. And today, Jack, we are going to talk text to donate and text to give.
Exciting.
Exciting stuff. We're going to talk about both technologies, why they're different, what our audience needs to learn. And we said this in an earlier episode, Jack, if you recall.
I do.
The more information you have, the more power you have. And we are going to demystify all this stuff so that you have the information that you need to make informed decisions.
Mm-hmm.
So, Jack, let's get started here. Tell me a bit about your day and week. What is new and exciting? How's life been for you?
Yeah. Well, here at Rally, we're really busy. I think that the year started with some doubt, I guess, and people woke up. We have a couple of fantastic new...
That's an understatement. That's why I'm giggling, by the way. Some doubt.
People woke up. They got out
new
of...
president, some doubt.
Yeah, new president. Then people got out of the holiday season and whether, this is anecdotal, but I think that people need to realize, or people are realizing that we got to pick up our base foundational fundraising. They're still working on their grants, right? But they're realizing like we really got to solidify base fundraising skills and tools. And that's why I think we're pretty busy. Yeah. A couple of great partnerships solidified this week. One with a brain tumor foundation, which is awesome. And they're looking forward to using us. They've been looking a long time for a partner. So we're happy to be that. And then a foster care place. We love kids around here. And
I love it. Yeah.
And my heart was warmed when they came back and were like, hey, let's do this. I'll tell you, they told me they had 13 kids in their offices sleeping in the conference room because they didn't have foster homes for these kids. And so our hope is that they can use our tools to go find and discover new volunteers and people that would gladly be foster parents. And so that's, we talk business here and we talk about all this technology, but at the end of the day, that's what we're doing here. And that's what we love. So,
yeah, working with individuals and organizations that are putting kids in homes that are meeting the need, in the moment. I'm a big fan of, we could talk about like Viktor Frankl and folks like that, but just finished a book on hope that he wrote. And one of the things that I liked about what he said, the analogy of like a zipper, right? I mean, if you think about a zipper taking two things and integrating them together or moving them together, right? Kind of like the fabric of life. So as we move through our day, and I say we as in, the audience and us, right? But as individuals, we move through our day, we're taking an experience and meaning, and we're bringing integration. We're taking raw resources and we're bringing them together and creating a meaning. I mean, if you think about it, tonight you will have created more experience and more universal like love and purpose and energy, if you would, than this morning, just by taking the day and kind of bringing it all together. So whether you're, like my grandpa worked the tractor in the field, tilled the soil and planted the crops and brought meaning out of the earth to feed the people, right? Particularly our family, but the community at large. And, he was, even my grandma, after he passed, kept the peanut farm for a while. Anyway, so the reality of the fact is that we're taking technology or, ones and zeros at the end of the day, like this software, and we're bringing it to meet people in the moment that are doing the work, our customers and those that are listening. And we're helping them like really create this like perfect intersection between what wasn't and what now is. And if that results in kids getting into homes and food shelters being full, shelves of food being full, folks off the streets, people in rehab, the needy poor being cared for, man, I tell you what, that's a fantastic place to be in. That excites me. That creates an incredible amount of hope and love and resilience. So yeah, that's exciting. I like that. Anyway, I'll get up my soapbox here.
So it's been a
very good week. That's right. And then I'll just say one thing, Jack, we hit a new goal. We had more customers sign up in 2 days than ever before. And we hit a new goal on that front. So it's just crazy to think about, man.
Yeah. It's been a great week. Yeah.
Yeah, that's awesome. I think nowadays we sign more customers in a day or in a week than we used to on an entire year. So that's incredible to think about. All right. Well, let's jump into text to give. Let's start with some definitions. We're first off, let's talk about text to give, and then we'll talk about text to donate, and you can compare and contrast the two. So why
Sure.
don't you kick us off with text to give? What is that, and why does it matter?
We were talking about this topic before we started, and I was pretty excited about it. And one of the reasons why is that the term text to give gets thrown around a lot. It gets thrown around about in the technology discussions. It gets thrown around by nonprofit organizations, and I think it's important to go through this, right? So when you see text to give, are probably one of the most frequent questions that we get is, can I donate from my phone? Like I can donate, like I can type in 10 and it'll donate to that, nonprofit or whatever, right? And if you're familiar and if you've been around a while, you'll remember that used to be a thing, right? You could
Yeah.
text it and then your AT&T or Verizon or whatever they were called, singular, I guess, these old companies would deduct it off your phone bill, right? But when I went to work for AT&T and I was in their texting group and we did all this kind of stuff, the phone companies don't want to be the nonprofit like processing arm of your donation. And so because all that stuff has to be, if it's a nonprofit and you get, tax deduction and everything else, and AT&T was having to manage all that. Like they're not a bank, that they're not going to do all that. And so the new era of text to give, really, with our devices, which are, now way more complicated, is by simply doing what you do today for other things. When you see a text and you go do something to buy something, it's really driven from the strategy of reaching out to somebody with Rally's text platform, and then having a call to action, and then leading them to a place where they donate. And so the concept of text to give is there's a communication to you on your device, and then you'll typically click through using, I'll say, a trusted link, right? A web link, right?
Sure.
And why do we do that? Why is the text to give this way now? Well, when you click through, there's all kinds of security, right? That has to happen when you're putting in your credit card and you're doing some of those things, right? So there needs to be security behind your donation. And so we just simply lead people to a space where they can conduct a transaction securely and clearly. And so you know what you're doing. And our phones are designed for that. And so text to give today isn't about texting a number that's associated with a dollar amount in your SMS text. It really is a proper and, I guess, respectful call to action for a donation from a nonprofit, leading you to a secure web page with where the transaction can happen.
Yeah, that's right. That's good. Yeah. And so for definition's sake, just for our audience, and you hit on this, so I'll recap. But text to give, the older model was text a keyword to a short phone number, for example, and then the system would automatically, maybe with a prompt, but based on how you answered the prompt question, would just hit your phone bill and take that money off the phone bill. Right. Now that technology actually still exists. It's not as common, but it is an option. Rally Core has a partnership with a group that does that. So if and every now and then I'll have a customer that insists on that option. It's a couple of things just to note, and I just went through this recently, so I think that would be helpful. The money is in that scenario is actually taken through a foundation or another nonprofit. AT&T, as much as they're great people, Verizon, telcos, the telephone companies are not going to interface directly with every nonprofit out there. There's like what, 2 million of them now? It's crazy, yes. Right? So what they do is they have a foundation that they work with, and you get the money from that foundation, which means that foundation has certain requirements, the way your board is structured, the size of your board, how often you meet. So obviously, because they're taking money on your behalf, there's some check boxes that need to be checked there. But at the end of the day, it comes down to one keyword, like say like the word bread, right? So if you text bread to this phone number, then everybody that texts that word to that phone number pays the same or donates the same, $5, $10, usually in $5 increments. But you define, when you create that word on that system, you define up front, everybody who texts in is going to donate the same dollar amount. And like I said, it's usually 5, 10, or I think up to 15, maybe $20. But at no point is someone putting in $250 and their credit card. It's just everybody's donating the same. Jack, just as a little history lesson, 2010, It's really when this made its big debut with the Red Cross and the Haiti earthquake, if you remember. Do you remember how much they raised on that?
I don't. It was in the hundreds of millions, something like
Yeah,
that.
it was good. Yeah, great. It was hundreds of millions would have been awesome. 43 million.
Oh, 43
Hundreds of
million.
millions over the course of multiple years. But yeah, that one campaign was 43 million. 2010 Haiti earthquake, and that was through the foundation. Now, I just texted that keyword to that phone number, and nothing happened. So it's
Yeah.
offline. And
Yeah.
there's a couple of reasons. A
And
couple of
Red
reasons for
Cross,
that.
I think people probably are most familiar with the Red Cross during those very urgent needs
Yep.
in the moment. We always say that
Yeah,
term.
on TV, Super Bowl.
Yeah, and I think they're probably what people are most familiar with, that
Yeah,
style of kind of
exactly.
donation. Yeah.
Yeah. So, well, when we first launched our company, we were in the process of signing a partnership agreement with a firm because we were, exploring text to give. And I thought there was some benefits to that. Now, a couple of drawbacks, of course, we run into a lot of nonprofits that just even the big ones don't meet the requirements for the board, so that's a problem. It's very expensive because you're paying this foundation to maintain this thing. So I mean, so there's a cost to it that and then you don't have as much access to the donor data. In fact, you don't have any access to the donor data, and you can't just very restrictive. You can't just simply reply back 2 days later with a thank you message, right? But in a large part, consumer behavior was changing even just 4 or 5 years ago when we were exploring this thing. The firm that we were looking and engaging with, one of two foundations that were doing this, notified us that they actually had to stop contract negotiation because they were filing for Chapter 11 reorganization and actually shut down. So, can you imagine all your nonprofits? You're waiting for checks to come, and all of a sudden, it's no more.
Yeah.
So every now and then I'll come across one of their keywords and one of their phone numbers, and I'll just text in to see what happens. And just like now, nothing happens. It's offline, so it doesn't work
Yeah.
anymore. Now, about the same time, though, and what precipitated this particular foundation shuttering its doors, was the fact that consumer behavior was changing. In the '90s, we were used to buying ringtones off of our phone bill, getting a joke of the day. Remember those
Oh
days?
yeah. Yeah, the
Yeah,
ringtones.
the
It was
ringtones. Yeah,
always
so
like a guilty pleasure to spend $9.99 for 12 months. You spend
exactly.
like $120 for a single ringtone over a
I
year.
know, it's crazy. Yeah, Apple thinks Apple. Yeah, so Apple Store and all that kind of came along and changed the way we were purchasing and our human and we have smartphones, right? Changing the types of purchases that we're making. So up along comes text to donate, and text to donate is different than text to give because text to donate, what we're doing is we're taking the money straight into a bank account and to your bank account or your Stripe account through an online web form. So we're routing somebody. They text a word like bread to a phone number like 24365, and then they're getting redirected to a landing page more consistent with how we're purchasing products online these days, right? Through a web page and with Apple Pay and We Pay and wallets on our smartphones. I scan my thumb and boom, it's in, right?
Yep.
So more consistent. And in that case, we own the contact record.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
Well,
it's
and the
not, we're not,
nonprofit does too, right?
and then, well, that's what I meant by we,
Yeah.
the nonprofit. Yeah.
Yeah.
Rally doesn't own anything.
Yeah.
In
Which I
fact, we
mean,
can't even see that data.
and we won't dive into the data side of things here, but I think that a lot of donations occur this way. Obviously, I mean, it's just kind of how everybody does it. And so now you have this important data, which is a valuable thing as well, right? And you can act on that data in a very positive way. I think sometimes people think of like big data as the term we used to have years ago, big data, right?
Big data,
But
yeah.
but there is a positive way to view donor data information, and you can do some great things with that as well. And so that's what the new style of text to donate enables for nonprofits, right?
Yeah. Yeah. And as a nonprofit, if I can maintain a relationship with my first party they call it, but the first, relationship with my donors and not have to go through a foundation to reach them again, then I can obviously build on that relationship. Because if I would argue that if you donated 5, 10, 15, $25, you're more apt to donate again. And then our average donations, we looked at the data last year for 2024 person events. The average donation on the Rally platform was $617, which is amazing. We had some events that raised, we had one in-person event, for example, just recently that raised I don't know, 153,000, I think. I'm going off of memory here, but it was just over 150,000. And the average donation in that event was over $1,000 because this is the nature of the event and how they had A little bit different strategy there. Broad campaigns, the campaigns that run off of the billboards, the radio shows, some of the organizations we work with that are more broad marketing, if you would, like consumer facing, where you might hear it on like a K-Love or an iHeartRadio or something like that. We work a lot with the NPRs. They raise on average $154 last year. So we went from moving, $5 increments up to, whatever it was, $25 or whatever, to allowing donors to put in their own dollar amount, even defaulting in some platforms the dollar amount that's preloaded, and then allowing you just to hit donate and hit your Apple Pay or what have you. So the donation amounts went up. Now I will say that I don't know many campaigns that did 43 million last year. So there's that, but I think it's in excess. For us, I mean, our goal is $1 billion a year across all of our customers. So we're getting pretty close to that.
And I think when we circle, if I put myself in the shoes of a nonprofit, and we talk about all this stuff, it sounds like it's complex, right? Like, I got to lead somebody over to this page and everything else. Well, when we go look at hundreds of nonprofits every month with our team here, everybody has a donation page. And that donation page has a little web address up there. And you know what's funny? When I go create a demo program for, I'll meet with somebody and I'll go create a text program for them to show them what a text to donate looks like.
And you do that yourself, right?
I do it myself, and it takes me less than 10 minutes because you know what I do? I simply copy their call to action and their web address. And it's what they would do also. So if a really busy guy like me I could go create a whole ton of these in a single day. Yeah. The nonprofit can get one done. And it's totally easy to do. And so the concept of text to donate and how, a text message leads somebody to a donation page, it's really easy. It's really easy. And like we say with all of our clients, we'll walk you through it. We train everybody with.
Yeah, we'll do it for you even.
Yeah. I mean,
we had a customer call us right before a big football game, and it was just, literally kickoff was like the next day. They were under a lot of stress because it turns out that what they were going to do was use QR codes during the event, but then Wi-Fi was a problem. Nobody thought about it. But when they got to the stadium the day before to get ready, the web page wasn't loading, and they're like, "Oh man, we got to shift gears here. We got to take more of a text to pledge, but we need to capture the dollar amount on the front end. So we have the cell phone, we know the dollar amount, then we can have the checkout process. And if they don't check out, we can trigger a text message, away from Wi-Fi the next day when it's a little bit better internet connection." So we did a football game that happened. We had a big jazz festival with several 100,000 people coming to this big jazz festival on the East Coast, one of the largest around, the largest gathering of Santa Clauses for a charity run in the world. Guinness World Book of Records, a customer out of Las Vegas, has all these Santas showing up, right? And the last thing you want to do is let Santa's text message not, make sure his text message gets through.
Right.
For the Santa run. But we've set these up in just a matter of minutes. I've been able to change them on the fly to address, nuances in the way the prompts are read. What's, how much do you donate, whether the checkout is on the front end or the back end of that piece of it, and then automating all that follow-up, right? So it's not complicated,
No, it isn't. And texts, by the way, make it through when everything else doesn't. I won't go into it. But I worked in telecom and the SMS infrastructure. Yeah. And you're 100% right. When that stadium and their Wi-Fi is overloaded and all these other things, texts make it through. Yep. So I told you at the beginning before we hit record here, but I took the family to Wicked here in San Diego last night, and they did a call to action at the end, which was amazing. They did QR codes, which is awesome. They had a couple of the cast come out from the show with big QR codes, and I can't help it. I have to see how that stuff works. Right? I'm in that line, but I'm also looking around, looking for how many phones came out, and quite a few phones came out. Not as many as I would have hoped, but anyway. So you scan the QR code. Well, what they did is they directed me to a webpage, which was great, except for in the Civic Center, the Wi-Fi was terrible. It just was not awesome. Had we triggered a text message instead, or done, one of our strategies that way, then we could have gotten a cell phone, and then we could have followed up with a message if they didn't, punch that link, right? Right.
Because I wasn't able to actually load the donation page until I got a little bit more in the middle of the building and kind of closer to the door. But where we
and
were
by then, that's a barrier to donation.
Yeah, the moment passed. Yeah.
The moment passed, right?
Yeah.
We talk about our tools reducing the barrier to a donation. And we have some future things coming with text to donate that reduces the number of movements someone has to do to make a donation.
Yeah.
And when you can
100%.
reduce from
Yep.
4 steps to 3 steps to maybe even
Yep.
2 steps or 1 step,
Yep.
when you reduce the barriers to someone donating to your nonprofit, your donations go up.
Absolutely. Yeah, no, that's a good point. Yeah, it's all barriers. I mean, there's so much desire to donate and to be involved. That's a forward momentum I think we have as humans to want to help fellow humans. I mean, we're inclined to do that. But the minute you take out your phone and so what happened? I scanned the QR code, but then I started snapping pictures because the whole time they're like, no pictures, right? I'm like, oh, well, here's my chance. I can grab a couple of pictures of the event on the front, not of the play. I wouldn't do that, but
Yeah, yeah.
of my family standing around. So now I'm off, doing but I've got squirrel brain anyway. Squirrel. I'm off thinking about something else. So,
Right.
but anyway, I did follow up with the donation later, but I want to make sure everybody gets that chance. Okay, so text to donate, newer than text to give in the sense that it's really more smartphone friendly, takes you to a web page. The nonprofit owns the data, can begin a conversation. The funds hit your account through your normal process. You're not having to reconcile another way of receiving funds at, however you receive donations on your website. Of course, we can, add little tags so that it's coming from the phone. But thermometers, let's talk about text to pledge and thermometers just real quick. There's text to pledge, which is maybe a little different than text to donate, where you're asking for money up front or the pledge up front. And we do that at a lot of events because sometimes people at events want to write bigger checks or use their donor advised fund or may have an in-kind donation, something like that. We had an event recently. I mentioned one of the donors donated 50,000 through text to donate, but obviously that's not going to go on the Visa card or ACH. I mean, it could have, I guess, but they're particular, knowing that they were going to have higher donations to that event, they opted to have the capture the pledge and the comment. So they were using it as a story wall where they could text in a story that would show up on the screen when approved. And that was a rolling thing that we built for them to show them those stories and the videos that were coming in. So, and then, top donor, rose to the top and kind of more of a competitive game kind of thing. And then, of course, the checkout process was done through, a little bit more of a check or at the back table or somebody walking up with the thing to see how do you want to pay for that, Mr. Smith. Anyway, so text to pledge with thermometers is good option for you. That obviously integrates with Classy, Fundraise Up, Give Butter, the other tools that are out there. Anything else that you think about text to give that you get asked that we could hit on quickly?
No, I think just the main idea. It's an all encompassing term when you see it out there. Yeah, I mean, I think we walk through it. I think when we talk about text to give and we talk about thermometers and you start to get the idea that Rally really is. I mean, we're texting, but we have a lot of other tools and we call them widgets. We call them widgets around here.
Yeah, I like widgets.
And I think that you left me with something last week, and I wrote it down here. And this is from a nonprofit perspective, but if we're going to do this nonprofit thing on our phones, you're eventually just going to do it with Rally. Yeah. And we have we have this texting thing, but you'd be surprised what we have. And our goal is to provide you a suite of things to use, centering around text to give, text to donate, and all of the support tools that you need around that. And so, more to come on that stuff, but
there's so much that happens on our phone. There's text this to that. There's voicemails. Of course, we get calls, tap to donate. We'll talk about that in a future episode. Our tap to donate technology is amazing. We just tap a thing, kind of like your checkout process. You can either obviously trigger a text message or take them to a donation form. And then there's, of course, push notifications, WhatsApp, and this RCS. We'll get a little bit more in the technical stuff with RCS and how that's going to change the world. And handshake domains. Even get started on like what blockchain does to the internet. Oh my goodness! Like Rally's, on the forefront of some of that technology, buying up some really interesting real estate in that world. So we're really excited about what's coming as we think about the decentralized internet, what that means to nonprofits and fundraising. So we'll talk more about that in the future. But here's my promise to folks that it's not complicated. We're talking one more path to your donation form. Well, that's it. Give one more opportunity to make it easy to give in the moment. You say, Jack, sometimes that messaging is for the moment. Or texting is for the moment, making it easy for people at the end of a broadcast or something online or at the end of a show like a play to take out their phone and get involved. That's amazing. That's incredible. So just one more opportunity for people to get involved, right?
You bet.
All right. Well, any closing thoughts, Jack? Anything that we should wrap up here on this episode on text to give versus text to donate and all the other ways to donate through your phone?
Yeah. No, I mean, this is just one exciting piece of what we enjoy talking about here. Like I said, it's probably one of the most asked questions we see by people we work with. So happy
Well,
to do this session on that.
yeah, very much so. We'll include a link in the show notes on an article that explains specifically about text to give and text to donate. If people want to explore either option, like I said, it is an option on our platform. We can do both. So we'll talk about when it might make sense to use one versus the other. I would say that 99.9999% of our customers go text to donate because it
Yep.
is 2025 and smartphones are what they are. And it's just good to give people that familiar purchase process or checkout process. But yeah, happy to answer any questions. And of course, comment if you have anything to add. And Jack, thank you again for your time today, as always. All right, my friend. Thank you.